Welcome to The Decision from Nashville EO, where you will hear the rest of the story after tough decisions were made by entrepreneurs who faced adversity and lived to tell about it.
Welcome to The Decision, the EO Nashville podcast by and for EO Nashville members. This is where we talk about all the fun times that we have being entrepreneurs, running a business, starting it before that, dealing with all the problems, the opportunities, the wins, the losses, in community with other entrepreneurs. And with me, my partner in crime, Mr. Robert Hartline.
Once again, glad to be with you, Eric.
Glad to be with you. And today we have the honor of having Amy Norton with Giant Southeast with us.
Thanks a lot. Glad to be here.
Thanks for being here. So we briefly touched on what you do before we started. Tell us more, please.
Yeah. So I have the great privilege of having a ringside seat to people making great transformations in their lives. So I am wired and equipped to help empower people to lead themselves. And I get to spend time with business owners and senior executives, giving them the skills and the tools to help clear up static, remove obstacles that make it hard to be aligned. So it's a lot of fun getting to do that work.
That's why you were asking me all those questions at the beginning, right?
Probably so. I'm very curious always about what people do. So if I hear something that sounds like what I do, I tend to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah. Well, that's always a good thing.
Yeah. I'm very curious.
Yeah. So how did you get started in that?
You know, I think I've always been doing this job, but about 11 years ago, I started doing it for real. I have always been somebody, even from a very young age, that people trusted with information, important information. And I had a lot of different jobs until I was in my mid-40s and was really feeling a desire to change gears and thought about going into social work or counseling. But I had teenagers at the time, and it was not a great time to leave the revenue stream and be a full-time student. And somebody that I was working with said, "Thank you for coaching me." And I didn't realize I was doing that. And it made me really curious about, what might that be like? So I had an opportunity to attend a leader development year-long program. And I sat in the first session, and what the company was doing, a company called Giant, I had this moment. It was like a download. I felt like I could see the rest of my life, which sounds a little dramatic, but it was a defining moment for sure. And I told him I was coming out of publication type of business, doing a lot of editing in a cool company that was doing a lot of online content. And I said, I don't know how I get to do what you're doing, but I can do this other stuff, because it was a startup company. And I said, I'll help you with all the books you're writing and all the stuff you're doing, but coach me up on how to do this. And I've never looked back.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe that feeling? Because I literally had that feeling this weekend at Tony Robbins. Yeah. But I was like, I was watching him for like 4 hours, and I turned to my wife and I was like, I'm going to do what that man's doing. But that feeling that you had, like, because it is almost like a spiritual feeling.
Yeah, it definitely had that quality. And I don't know who has said it, but people who, you probably know the source for this because you do this work, thinking about purpose being the intersection where what you're really good at and the deep pain in the world collide. Whoever said that, it was kind of that moment. And the session was about knowing yourself to be able to lead yourself. And we were diving into, maybe it was Myers-Briggs or our 5 Voices content, where we're really learning what our tendencies and personality styles are. And there was something about the facilitator speaking some truth that connected to pain I felt and need and longing to do something in the world. It was just this transformational moment, honestly. And I did feel kind of like I was watching a movie reel play, like this is it. I felt like I had discovered fire.
Those transformational moments don't go away. And I talked about that in the EO Talks presentation that I did. And you were right
I
after
was listening.
me. Yeah. And it was, well, I didn't know immediately. And it was sometimes you run into people that push that button, and you got fortunate to be put in this situation where, oh gosh, I would like to do that.
Yeah.
And so you took that next step and just so what did that look like to go out on your own and begin doing that? Or was it with that organization that you?
It was with that organization.
Yeah.
And I have a company that operates separately now that uses a lot of that material.
Yeah.
But it was hard to get started because I didn't have a frame of reference for how to build a business around coaching and consulting. And one of those things, like when it works, you know you're doing something right, but you don't have conscious competence to describe the steps.
Yep.
And my husband has been an entrepreneur his whole life. I don't think I'm a natural entrepreneur. So starting something from scratch felt very scary. So I got really good at asking people questions and inviting myself to watch them do what they did. And the founders of Giant were great at apprenticing me. We were a very young startup company, so I had a ringside seat to learn at the people's feet who really developed what we were using. So I think it was just a process of information and application over time that allowed me to develop my facilitation chops and learn how to do it well.
And I would assume that because you're always asking questions and you're curious, somebody heard you talking and you got introduced to EO somehow. How did that happen?
So a really dear friend, Nancy Stabell, who's an EO member, she and I have helped each other. She's done legal work for me. I've helped her in her business with her law firm. And I have helped her have some major insights that have helped her personally and professionally. And we were having a celebration cocktail before the end of the year a few years ago. And I told her, Nancy, my business has just crossed over the $1 million mark. And she said, oh my goodness, you have to join EO now. And I said, what is that? What is it? Street legal? What is it? So she told me all about it. And I got really curious about it.
And so how has your experience been so far in EO? It's
been good. I'm on my second forum. Our first forum had members who, for various reasons, decided not to stay in. So we've reformed, and I'm learning a lot through watching other people struggle with similar things. And the thing I like the most is that having your own business can be very lonely, and it's a really great community of people who are dealing totally different businesses, but the things that keep you up at night, it's really nice to have that shared community. That is unbelievably helpful.
We're united by our problems,
right?
I like to think.
Yeah, totally.
Do you feel like a lot of entrepreneurs have some formal leadership training or not?
Can you say a little more? That feels like you're laying a trap or something.
Well, no, I feel like I never properly got trained as a leader, like in my corporate experience, because I never had a leadership role. I always I was in sales, and then it wasn't until I started to have staff, and I never really got formal leadership development. And it wasn't until I hired a coach that kind of made me aware that I had some skills that I was lacking.
In my experience, do you like how I did that?
Very good.
Do I get points?
Yep.
I'm observing that some people have natural leadership abilities, and they may not know that they have those, but they do things right accidentally, just naturally. And I think some people have more of that. Some people have less of that. By and large, unless somebody's been in a corporate environment and that's been part of the vibe and the regular training, I don't think a lot of entrepreneurs have a lot of leadership development in the traditional sense.
How do you know they don't really have the leadership chops? Is there something that signals to you that or is that something that anybody could learn?
I think that could be a layered question and a layered answer. To me, leadership is not about making things happen necessarily. So there's management in business, and then there's leadership. And the management piece is making sure we're making the donuts. and that the lights are on. And there's that component. The leadership piece is about influence and helping people achieve and expand their capacity and potential. And those are two different skill sets. And some people are naturally inspirational and charismatic and can see potential and call that up in you. And some people have to learn how to do it. And I see that those are not necessarily always related for entrepreneurs.
For you as a leader before EO and then after EO, are you a different leader now?
I think, well, yeah. I mean, none of us are the same 3 years ago versus today, unless you're intentionally trying to stay the same. So I think what's different is that I'm surrounded by people who are taking risks, and me by myself, I probably wouldn't. I think I'm feeling some, not safety necessarily, but some risk tolerance that I didn't have a few years ago. And I think that's a really big part of being an entrepreneur, is being able to take risks. And I'm not naturally wired. I'm more naturally wired to say there's a problem here, you're going to trip and fall, versus I don't see that. I see the future. So I think that's what's good for me about being an EO, is that I'm taking some risks that I don't think I would have taken without.
What's the biggest decision that you've had to make as an owner?
I think originally, about 3 years ago, I stood up a company called Giant Southeast. Giant Worldwide, the original company that I joined, changed its business model. And when that happened, I had to stand up my own business. And I had a consulting entity, but I didn't really do anything with it. And I didn't want to build a brand by myself. So I went into business with two other partners in Atlanta, and we started Giant Southeast. And that was an important decision, because now it was not just me. It was working with two other people and deciding what our mission is, what our desires are, how we want to operate. And I think that was a definite fork in the road. I didn't want to do things by myself, so it was really important to have people to do something with. But there's a lot of complexity when you're not just by yourself.
I keep hearing this all the time. Like, if you don't have a partner, you want a partner. If you have a partner, you don't want a partner. So, like, we always think it's going to be greener on the other side. It is more complex.
I would not want to do what I'm doing without my partners. In fact, I don't know how I did it as long as I did without them.
What do you have as a result of having partners that you didn't have before?
I have other voices not in my head, voices in my head that are not my own, I think. I can get really in my head about things.
Leaders in their head? No.
Yeah.
No, that just never happens.
It's not just me.
I don't have that experience.
Oh, well. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, is that I've got two people who are total champions for me. And when I'm having a hard time, I feel like I've got brothers, the two guys that I trust implicitly. I think they would take a bullet for me, and I would do that for them. And I also, people who will call me on my bullshit. You know, if I'm way too close to something, they give me great perspective, and they help me see things a different way. They help me keep the door open. We were talking about that.
Yeah.
And it's because they've got complementary personalities, complementary skill sets. We all do different things really well. And I think it's the amalgamation of all that is what is the magic for me.
And when you knew you had to make this tough decision, in the moment you actually made the decision, was there a gap there? Was there a number of weeks or months that you had to really stress yourself out just trying to decide what you were going to do? Or was it making decisions simple for you?
I feel like it was, I don't want to say it was a snap decision, but I didn't hesitate. When Dan suggested that we form a company with Brandon, I knew them both really well already. And it felt like an answered prayer, honestly, because I had been in Nashville doing this work for years by myself and traveling and doing co-working with other people. But it was great. I never looked back. It was not a hard decision. And standing up the company really didn't take long. I think it felt like a long, dry season prior to that.
Did you spend much time in the who's going to do what phase and how can my unique
still
ability?
Are.
Oh, really?
We still don't have it all ironed out. We're better now, but we've spent a lot of time trying to get role clarity and figuring out what we do well. So one guy does all of our operational stuff, and one guy is really the visionary, and I tend to be more of an integrator and making sure we're implementing our programs with our clients in an effective, consistent way. So we've kind of fallen into roles based on what we naturally do really well.
I heard some EOS words there.
Oh, yes.
How has that affected that relationship with your partners?
EOS?
Yeah.
They are not EOS implementers. I was for a season.
Okay.
And I see the wisdom in not duplicating effort and having the right person in the right seat and not having an ego about that. That's, I think, hugely important. So they're absolutely on board with that. That's been really good. Are you EOS too?
We use EOS. Of course, Robert's an EOS implementer.
That's right.
Yeah. And there are a lot of EO members. Of course, EOS was started by an EO member.
Yeah.
Gino Wickman.
Did not know that.
Oh, yeah. From Detroit, I believe.
How about that? That's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
you work for Vern Harnish.
I love scaling up too. I think that's a great model.
Yeah. And what do you feel is your unique ability?
I think the thing that I do that is really unique for me is, it's not easy to put it into words. I create quickly an environment where people trust me with really important information. And I am able to have direct conversations with people and bring challenge and push without getting defensive responses from people. And I think that's unique. I think that's a good skill set in the world that I'm in a corporate environment where there are lots of egos and potential ill will. It's really kind of cool to be able to sit with people who are oppositional and help them see where they're coming from and own things without them becoming defensive. I never get tired of that. That's always fun.
What are some of those, maybe the big three, or you can choose a number of roadblocks that leaders tend to have that you help them with?
So I think a lack of alignment is huge. If we're pulling in opposite directions in the same boat, we're not going to get anywhere. So getting clarity around where we're misaligned is huge. And it takes a lot of listening skill to be able to do that. I think communication is huge, and we're communicating all the time, and our communication is way more than words. And we create perceptions and start making up stories, and having the ability to have a leveler in your team, a level set moment where we really understand why we're doing things the way we are. I think that's really important. Also think that being able to have trust is that is fundamental. So those would be three key things that I think I'm uniquely equipped to help people develop where that's not existing.
So now that you've been in EO for the length of time that you have, was there any challenges you brought to your form that you needed help with? And how was that experience going through a presentation? Was it coach? Was it not? What was that experience like?
Dealing with issues in our forum?
Yeah, no, just issue that you may have brought to forum to get help with.
I think we've had in our forum interesting moments where we've been dealing with similar issues, but different businesses. So I've gotten a lot of help. For example, one of the things we struggle with in our company is vision. Like, we know what our mission is. We're really clear on our values. We understand our roles, but what's the end game? Imagining what we're going to do in 5 or 10 years. What's the ultimate vision for our company? That's been something we've had a really hard time with. And sort of by osmosis, seeing how my forum mates are dealing with that, I'm learning some things and having some conversations around, maybe I do a deep dive presentation on that topic and I get inputs from other people and hear their experience on how they've dealt with that. That's been really helpful.
I mean, that's not an uncommon thing for lots of people is, I can tell you how many times I've sat in a session and everybody knows they're going to talk about a 10-year vision and they sit there with a blank stare like,
it's the blank page.
Well, I mean, there's a ton of opportunities, but I'm like,
there's too many.
You have X number of years on this earth. Like, what could be exciting?
Yeah.
What would be something that would fire your team up, would fire you up, give you energy, give you a why to be in business and do what you do? And I am amazed at how many visionaries aren't as visionary, which drives me nuts when I'm doing a session because I'm like some of these people cannot see how awesome how awesome their team is and their company is, but they're so caught up in the day-to-day, they can't even imagine what's possible.
Yeah. Well, it's you can't do it by yourself. I think visioning by yourself, it's hard to be honest with yourself by yourself. And I think vision is the same way. You really need input from other people, reflect back what it is you hear me saying. And maybe that's just me, but when I have discussions with people and this is what I'm thinking about, how would you make it bigger, more expansive or different? I think the discovery process there is what helps me shape ultimately where I want to go or the picture that I'm seeing. It's hard for me to do that by myself.
Yeah.
Y'all like that? Or is that just me?
No. And what bubbles up for me is once I discovered what my core purpose was, that really shaped what my vision would be for the company and really for my life. The idea, I've got friends who their thing is, I'm going to build a huge company and I'm going to sell it. And then I'm going to go do something else. And that's not who I am. And it took me a while to come to grips with that because it's like you're surrounded by so many of these people in EO that that's their thing. They want to build it and grow it and sell it and move on and do something completely different.
Well, in that scenario, it starts with asking them, you want to build a big business. Why?
Why? 7 times.
And then once you get the why, there's and the question is how. The question is really not how, it's who.
Right.
And then you get the how. But a lot of people that why thing, I'm learning more and more. I've been told this over and over, but I forget. I forget to ask that question about even for for me. Why am I even doing this? What's powering the energy behind it?
Yeah, and the why. A big bunch of money doesn't really satisfy your purpose.
Yeah.
If you still don't have a purpose and what you're going to do with the rest of your life. So many people die after they retire.
So the mortality rate this is hard to believe. For entrepreneurs who sell their business, the year after their business is the riskiest year of their life.
Really?
50% mortality rate.
That's scary.
For people selling their business when they're over a certain age. And when you think about that, it's like, whoa. And I'm in strategic coach with Dan Sullivan. And one of the first days of training is deciding how long you're going to live. And, he wrote a book, 156 years. And you go through these exercises about, how long? Because, when you think about it, which is so true, we are conditioned to think life expectancy, the average life expectancy of an adult male is fill in the blank. But that is a self-limiting belief. If you're going to build your whole, and if you're healthy and you have the resources, you're not having to work like you had to work early, right? We're going to live longer than that, but we have been conditioned to a retirement age. We've been conditioned to sell your business and live on the beach and all this, but nobody really loves that lifestyle once they get it. And once they've had a couple of pina coladas for a couple of weeks, it's not fulfilling anymore. and they lose purpose. And if they didn't have a lot of, and this is what Dan Sullivan teaches, is A, you got to have something to look forward to. B, you have to have younger friends, because if you're healthy, all your friends have died, and you're more likely to die of loneliness than you're going to die of a disease. And so, like, once you go through that exercise when he does it, it's like, oh, my reason isn't to grow and sell a company. My reason is I need to figure out what I love to do, and then I need to love the people I do it with.
Yes.
And love the people I do, not only the business, my personal life, my family, love all of that. And then that's where he's like, you should be living in heaven on earth, doing what your unique ability is, and that.
I completely agree. I've just read a book called The Great Work of Your Life by a guy named Stephen Cope, and it's about your purpose and your calling. And the premise of his book is that we've all got something in us that needs to come out. And if we don't figure out a way to channel that, it's going to destroy us. And I think maybe if an entrepreneur kicks the bucket after they sell their company, it's because they've removed the power from their engine. You know, they're not pursuing the thing that's their purpose. And I think it can change.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I did as a kid that came back to me in a meeting years ago, thank you for coaching me, I think that's always been in me. And I think the reason I have a hard time thinking about vision, this is just some insight I'm having right now, is that I have vision for my clients. I can see everything for you that you can't see yet for yourself. It's hard for me to see it for the structure of a business, because that's not really what I care about. I love that I've got a business, but ultimately it's not the business that is my purpose. It's the people on the other side of me.
Yeah. So if you were starting EO tomorrow all over again, but suddenly you got this burst of inspiration and knowledge of how to do EO right, what would you tell yourself to do starting out in EO again?
I think I would remind myself that it's about learning and not getting it right. I think I felt like there was a right way to do things when I came to EO, and there are all the rules about the forum and expectations and all that. And I'm somebody who wants to get it right. And I think I would tell myself there are a lot of ways to get it right. And it's discovering that, as opposed to having some checklist that you're going to get an A or an F on.
Yeah, I've noticed that over the years of being in forum, that the more I've just kind of turned loose and had no expectations for what a meeting would be, if I'm listening to somebody else's deep dive and just try to put myself into their story and understand the emotions that they're talking about, which when we started doing that, that really helped us connect to the person doing the deep dive, that you can kind of turn loose and forget about, I'm trying. It feels almost, I made it like a competition, like, I'm going to be the person that gives the best experience share. And it's not about me as the individual. It's about, helping that other person discover something unique.
Yeah. I used to think that I'm there to help others in forum.
You should be selfish.
Right? We're supposed to be selfish.
That's right.
And like that mindset is like once you're given that permission, I mean, you help others just by telling your story with the struggle. Like, I am struggling with X. What would you recommend? Like, going through the storytelling piece of the equation. And that is probably something that you experience with leadership teams. When you get them to deeply go vulnerable, they start solving lots of problems organically without your involvement.
Oh, yeah.
But your role is to give them the safety to be able to go deep, go vulnerable, because those are the moments, like, I'm sure you see this when you get leaders to go vulnerable and you just watch the magic.
Oh, yeah.
It's like this magical stew of like all these epiphanies that they have. And you're just sitting back, yeah.
Don't tell. But I always love it when people cry in a retreat session. No, I've got you. We're going to do great things together.
You're lucky today.
Why is that?
Because I could have made you cry. But I didn't.
It's right here. It doesn't take much.
That is a fun skill to navigate because at the end of the day, I think we all are deeply want to connect with other people. Mm-hmm. And when we feel that deep, meaningful connection, then there's just like this unlock that happens, especially when leaders start to realize that skill.
Yeah.
And then when they're sitting in front of that employee who is a total butt to deal with, mm-hmm. and to stop and go, wait a minute, you are in them. Mm-hmm. Where are you in them? And once you can tap into that, then you're going to get them to unlock that little thing that has been driving their life crazy. Because everything they're struggling with at work has nothing to do with work. We all know it's nothing to do with work. And once you can show them that, oh, wait a minute, that story that you got going on in your head, it's not true. And it's showing up in the work too. But let's go, where did it start? And when you start unpacking everything and they start realizing, whoa. And that's when you have leaders jump up in the organization. And I think a lot of people seem to think that people can't change. And that's not true. I've seen change. And I think it all starts with vulnerability. Number one, you do that in your start, that's when people are starting to grow.
I agree. And I think there's something really connected to vulnerability and being present. And when we talk about being selfish in EO in our forums, I substitute being present. Because if I can really be present and listen the way you're talking about, Eric, that's where the gold is, I think. It's being present, and that allows you to be vulnerable.
Yeah, that's a better term for it. Mm-hmm. Because if you're just there and you're hanging on every word that the person is saying, you disappear.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I like that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yeah.
So if you are an entrepreneur here in Nashville, Tennessee, and you're looking for a community because you feel alone, just maybe you could visit eonashville.com and understand why there's over 300 entrepreneurs right here in Nashville, Tennessee, Music City, USA, to be in community with. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week.
Thanks for listening to the Decision Podcast by Nashville EO. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.